Could you say just a little bit more about Johnson Forest and how it was organized and what it...
Johnson Forest was an organization that was built ultimately around the production of a working class newspaper in the United States. It had a woman's page. It had a Negro page, that was the word used then, and it had a youth page, and it had a page of correspondence, that is people writing in their stories or whatever they wanted, not only commenting on what was there, but commenting on anything. And it was really trying to make Marxism accessible to working class people in the United States and trying to incorporate every sector within it. And it was just an amazing experience. I mean, to be writing about women, I was invited to do a pamphlet called I called it A Woman's Place. In 1952, that pamphlet is still in publication because people still find it useful and interesting. It was about grassroots women. I mean, there were no words that my mother didn't understand. You know, my mother thought it was a very good pamphlet. The only when I showed it to her, she said, "Yes, this is more sensible," you know. And I sold it in the factory where I worked during McCarthyism. People didn't know it was political. They knew there was something funny about it, but they didn't know it was political. But they discussed with me what was in it. They said, "No, this is not right. This is right," and all the rest. And that's how we tried to break out of the holes and corners in which the left had been pushed and allowed themselves to be pushed, and break away from the domination of intellectuals to really get to the grassroots and to get to our own grassrootsness so that we could contribute politically in the way that was appropriate.
I want to turn to the Global Women's Strike. Could you tell me how it was founded? And I mean, 60 countries participate. How is it organized in terms of what kind of women, organizations, and women and men participate over the 60 countries? And how do you find a central agenda to keep unity? And how it's organized over so many different countries?
Right.
Yeah.
It began because somebody wanted Margareta D'Arcy in Ireland wanted to ask the National Women's Commission to call a strike of Irish women when on the 8th of March, the first International Women's Day in the new millennium. And she said, "Please write me a letter of support." And I did. I said, "Fine." And I said, if the National Women's Commission does call a strike of Irish women, we will call a global strike of women. And they didn't, but we did. I mean, fundamentally, that's how it happened. And then we had to get it together, and we called a meeting of any women who would come and worked out the demands of the strike. These demands now do represent the strike, and I'll just run through them to tell you why these demands are there, because it is central to the way that the strike is organized. The first and central demand is payment for all caring work in wages, pensions, land, and other resources, depending on what country women are in. One or the other or all may be appropriate. And increasingly we've said that this money must come from military budgets, so that what evolved is the slogan, or calling the perspective, invest in caring, not killing. Women are the carers, overwhelmingly in the world. It's not that we don't want to care, it's that we don't want to be the only ones to care, and we don't want to do that caring.
I mean, when you say women are carers, you mean that is a social position, not as a biological...
Absolutely.
It's not something which is a given to women. It's a social position.
You know, the question of what is biological and what is social is not easily answered. With women's caring work, it does absolutely begin biologically. And in fact, Marx does refer to the first division of labor being biological in the German ideology. It's a very interesting section, which I think people should read. But in my experience, in our experience here, the fact that women give birth to and breastfeed the young is tremendously important. And we have to emphasize that women have a right to this and infants have a right to this, because many feminists feel threatened by anything that links women with children in a biological way. I mean, they think that we should not be biological. What's wrong with being you know, it's very capitalistic to dissociate yourself from your biological functions, and there's nothing wrong. As a matter of fact, it's a great honor to be that sector of that gender, to be able to produce children. As a result of that, the division of labor has continued, where men are not considered to be carers, and that has to stop. The fact that men do not do caring is really a problem, in the sense that, you know, some years ago we went to work with some women where a factory had closed and the men and the women were on strike, trying to get the factory to re-employ them. And the women had taken an active part, and we asked why. And the women said, because the men were destroyed by the fact that the factory closed. And one woman said it was like a bereavement. And men's connection with waged work is often more important than any other one thing in their lives. And that's not good for the movement. You have to be able to walk out of waged work and not feel that your identity is deeply dependent on it. Your identity is dependent on your relationships with other human beings rather than your relationship with your employer or with your work. So that, you know, the question of biology and the question of social and political and economic life blend into one another, but we know definitely where biology is not in any way involved. And that, but because of the experience, that's what we have to bear in mind, because of the experience of women and the experience of men, we play different functions often in the movement, and women are doing the work of caring within the movement without being recognized, as little recognized within the movement as in within capitalist society generally. So the question of wages for caring work, especially in societies where caring work is what keeps the society going, because it's not a money economy, because the women do the agricultural work, because the women feed the children and feed everybody by their agricultural work, by all the preparation of food, which is often very complicated and takes a great deal of time. To say wages for caring work is really a universal demand and need of women. We found out that we had to have an organization where people did not A, negotiate between the sectors, and B, scab on each other. And we were always working out against the scabbing, and this is what happened. And then a group of lesbian women said, we want to be in the campaign, but we want to keep our organization. And we thought about it, and we said, well, we don't see anything against that, come in. And then we had a big fight, because they wanted to be separatists. We're special, we're lesbian, nobody's special. Or rather, everybody's special.